Flint, Michigan is still in the midst of this crisis with its water. And this is nothing new. There's poisoning, a lack of water quality across the country. Of course, disproportionately affect people of color, low-income people. It's a structural issue in this society, and it is absolutely an issue of institutional racism. One of the really funny things about Flint, though, is I understand how in certain instances it takes 10 minutes of abstract thought process to say, oh, while there might be, as an example, local problems in Baltimore, right? I'm not going to go to bat here to defend local Baltimore institutions like the mayor, the police department, or the real estate developers or anything else. But you can also take a couple of steps back and go, oh, part of the reason that a city like Baltimore might be having problems is because of structural racism, deindustrialization, underinvestment in cities, brutal racist policing policies, and so on, right? You think a few steps out, and then you can have a structural understanding of how the economy works, how race works, and things like that. Now, I would never want to burden Ben Shapiro or any of his fans to have to think out a couple of steps through that process. I understand that that's not very logical.
He doesn't give you enough time with his fast speaking.
He doesn't give you enough time with his fast speaking, and it's much more comfortable to just tell simple bedtime stories so that you don't have to actually deal with any problems or deal with our current history, our current reality or history. But when you talk about Flint and you do this angle, you run up against some very basic problems. This is Ben Shapiro.
Okay, so it's environmental racism, this kind of racism, and that kind of... Okay, then Marianne Williamson steps in. And Marianne Williamson actually makes a pitch that, again, is spiritual in nature, and thus, when it comes to issues of race, is actually more attractive. Here's Marianne Williamson putting the slavery reparations question in a way that actually sounds more reasonable than the way Democrats are talking about it.
I assure you, I lived in Grosse Pointe. What happened in Flint would not have happened in Grosse Pointe. This is part of the dark underbelly of American society. The racism, the bigotry, and the entire conversation that we're having here tonight, if you think any of this wonkiness is going to deal with this dark psychic force of the collectivized hatred that this president is bringing up in this country, then I'm afraid that the Democrats are going to see some very dark days. We need to say it like it is. It's bigger than Flint.
Okay, and so, again, she's wrong. Flint is governed by minorities. I mean, the folks who are, the mayor of Flint was black at the time. The folks who were involved in the Flint water crisis were of minority descent. It wasn't white people cramming down a situation on Flint. By the way, they're all Democrats. But what she's actually saying there is more speaking to the heart and soul of the Democratic Party than anything that Elizabeth Warren just said.
Okay, so that's interesting that he would frame it that way. I don't know. I mean, I actually do think there's a huge value in some of the ways that Marianne Williamson is actually talking about those issues. And I do think things like Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the reality, whether it's spiritual, psychological, or otherwise, but the effort to simply force and get people to understand American history is very significant. So, and it's interesting that that even someone like Shapiro is actually sort of forced to understand that on some limited level. But that being said, we just got to get this out of the way. Flint, Michigan, run by African Americans. In 2000, and just let's be clear here, Flint's population is being decimated for decades. You can go back to the Roger and Me, Michael Moore documentary about deindustrialization. In 2011, Rick Schneider, Nerd That Cares, one tough nerd was his slogan, forced Flint into state control. He set up a board of oversight and overseers, which had some diverse representation, and they implemented a brutal austerity plan on Flint, including the changes to their water system that led to the poisoning of the residents of Flint. It's shocking that Rick Snyder and others haven't been criminally charged. So just to be clear, in this specific instance, Forget even the broader structural questions of why certain communities are poisoned and not others, which Ben Shapiro has no grasp of and no interest in. In this one instance of Flint, even that cheap, misleading, disingenuous, essentialist, and dumb talking point isn't even true. Local officials did not have control over their water policies. Period. Full stop.
I'm going to have to shout out
Maybe I said that too slow.
My literary hangover episode on George Orwell's looking back on the Spanish War, because I think it gives insight into why Ben Shapiro might like Marianne Williamson's approach here. He has this toward the end. It says, behind all the ballyhoo that is talked about godless Russia and the materialism of the working class, and reminder, George Orwell, for people who don't know, wasn't a huge fan of Stalin's Russia. Behind all the ballyhoo that is talked about godless Russia and materialism of the working class lies a simple intention of those with money or privileges to cling to them. Ditto, though it contains a partial truth, like we said with Marianne, with all the talk about worthlessness of social reconstruction not accompanied by a change of heart. The pious ones, from the Pope to the yogis of California, are great on the changes of heart, much more reassuring from their point of view than a change to the economic system.
That's great. He's missing liberation theology, which certainly has a change to the economic system. So this isn't, I mean, this can be a false choice.
What liberation theology, what's the lineage of that?
Basically Marxist priests in Latin America.
Right, but
so they were, people like
years?
Romeo. Well, fair enough. That's later on.
Yeah, this is in the 30s.
That's
right?
fair enough. That's
Right.
later on.
But he's
salty
okay.
He's missing
Gandhi
people like Doris Day, who were, there was always Catholic and Jewish socialist. Gandhi's a much more complicated figure. So,
it contains a partial truth there.
No, it's all right. Fair enough. You know what? In the 1930s, this was a brilliant argument. And you're right about why it would appeal to Shapiro. All right, Jay Cool. Thanks.